In this demonstration, we're going to begin by adding some wall hatches to both the interior and the exterior wall. We're then going to be tagging all the doors and windows so that they will have an identification tag which can then be referenced on a door and window schedule. And then finally we're going to create both a door and window schedule using the table command. I'm setting up the standards on how we want that to show. So let's go ahead and let's begin by going into model space, and I'm going to go ahead and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to isolate the wall layers so that when it comes time to hatch we won't have any of these other hatches or any extra line work that will be getting in the way of identifying the closed boundaries for the hatch. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to the isolate button right here on the layers panel under the home tab, and I'm going to isolate just the two layers that represent our walls. Hit enter. And what we've done is we've isolated it here. Now since we did this in model space, when you go back through all of our sheet layouts you're going to see that they're all turned off also, or isolated. But that's not a problem because later on we're going to go ahead and unisolate it and then identify exactly what we want to turn on and off. So the next thing I want to do is I want to create some unique layers so that we can, using layer control, be able to turn them on or off. So I'm going to go to layer properties, and it doesn't really matter where you do it, but for now it's already set to a wall interior right in here as a current. I'm going to go ahead and just click a new layer, and directly underneath that it created a layer 1, which I'm going to edit the name to A-wall as the major group, and then I'm going to do the minor group. It's going to be HTCH, and I'm going to add a second minor group which is going to identify on which sheet or on what type of drawing I want this to set this up. Now everybody might have a slightly different way of doing this, but I found this, at least for this assignment, is the best way to do it. I'm going to change the layer color. Let's just go ahead and let's select something like 53. Now the most important part of this is going to be the line weights. Previously I had mentioned that most hatching we're going to want at a very thin line weight. So I'm going to go ahead and just change this and go to 00. Even though it's 00, it's still, the printer will recognize it and print it. So there I've created my first wall layer hatch. Continuous line type is what we want in this case. So let's go ahead and let's create a second one. This one I'm going to call A-wall-HTCH. Notice I'm only using 4 characters per minor group. And for this one I'm going to do FLOR to represent on the type of drawing that we're going to do it. I'm going to go ahead and change the color so it's a little bit different from what we had. Let's go ahead and let's just do 73. Do OK. Continuous is fine, and there we go with a line weight at 00. And now what we can do is we can set one of these as our current layer. I'm going to click that, set it as our current layer, close the layer properties manager, and as you can see I'm already set up for the A-wall hatch site layer. Now what I want to do on the site plan, I want to indicate the site plan hatching for the walls. I want every wall in my site plan to be indicated as solid. So we're going to be using this layer with a solid hatch on all the walls, both exterior and interior walls. So let's go ahead and let's go to the hatch command here in the draw panel. I'm going to click on solid. Now all of this is important. Make sure it's still set by layer. You've got all this set up. The scale is already set there. So I'm going to start by beginning to click on individual closed boundaries that are going to be representing all the walls. Now I'm going to do these, and I'm going to sequence it as I go along. Hit enter, enter to begin the command again. Click on there. And if you notice, I'm limiting the amount of hatch areas, closed boundaries, because I don't want to have one large hatch, which in case I need to move doors or I need to change sizes of doors or have to make some adjustments, I don't want to have to turn off the whole hatch and be required to redo it. So what I'm doing is I'm just going and hitting enter, enter, and sort of working my way around in here using the hatch command and just isolating it through smaller groups rather than doing all of the walls. So I'm going to finish that up. Now again, your sequencing might be slightly different, but conceptually it should be pretty much the same in terms of why we're doing it. Now I've sort of finished all the exterior ones. I'm going to go ahead and begin with the interior ones. A lot of these are tied in very, in long expanses, so don't worry too much about that. I'm just going to do by groups. Got a few more. Now, if you get a pop-up window like this, it means that you accidentally hovered over or selected something that is not within a closed boundary. What you want to do is just make sure that you have selected what we call the closed boundaries. And that may be all of them. Let's take a look and let's see what it looks like on. Let's press escape to get out of the command. And if you can see here, what we've done is this is now going to be reflected on all the sheets. And using layer control, we'll be able to turn it on or off. So let's go ahead and let's go back to our model. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make the A-wall hatch floor our current layer, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to temporarily freeze the hatch that we just added. Now for this hatch we only want to do the exterior masonry walls, so we're only going to be hatching our exterior walls in addition to the two columns, which are masonry columns that we're going to be doing. So once again, with the proper layer selected, let's go ahead and select the hatch command. I'm going to go ahead and just scroll down a little bit, and the hatch that I want to use is an ANSI 37. Click on that. Everything here looks good, but my scale may be a little bit off, so I'm just going to test it on one of them. So I'm going to click on here, and if you click on there, it almost looks solid, but when you zoom in, you notice that the pattern selected with the ANSI 37 is just very, very tight. So what we need to do is we need to adjust this according to the typical scale that we want to represent it in, which is down here is going to be represented at 1/4 inches equal to a foot, which is what we want on the floor plan sheet. So what we need to do is we need to put a multiplier in here. I'm going to use 48 because usually for 1/4 inch floor plan representations of hatch, that seemed to have worked for the walls for me. So I'm going to hit enter, and there it does, it modifies it. This is not always the case for 1/4 inch drawings for the representing of the hatch, but this one specifically seems to work out pretty good. So I'm going to continue using the same concept of limiting the areas that I'm going to hatch. Enter, enter, and continue my way down these walls. And then finally the two columns. And that looks good, but if we go to the site plan, okay, I need to get out of the command first by hitting escape. And if you take a look at that, that shows on the site plan. That's not the representation we want for the site plan, so we're going to do some layer controlling onto that. And there it is for the floor plan. So what we did is we've actually created these hatches in model space. I'm going to go back to the layers panel under the home tab, and I'm going to unisolate. And now if you look at the walls, okay, it's turned everything on, but in the meantime what we did is we actually froze the layer for a wall hatch site. So let's turn that back on. And if you notice, it's now represented on every single one of the walls. This is how we want it to see or to look on our site plan. The problem is we still have the other hatch turned on, which we only want that hatch to be shown on the floor plan. So with a solid hatch over the other hatch, it really doesn't matter in this case, but imagine if you had two different types of hatches and you didn't want to show this as solid, you wanted to show it as something else. You would want to make sure that you turn off that other hatch for this viewport, for this sheet. So right now I've been zooming in and out, and because this has been locked, that works great. With my viewport open, what I want to do is I want to go to the layer properties, and I want to make sure that I freeze under the series of columns here. We went over this before in one of the previous videos on how to do layer control per viewport. So what we want to do in here, we want to do a viewport freeze. We're going to go down to our A wall hatch floor, which is this one here. And what I want to do is I want to freeze that one. So I'm going to go ahead and close this once I did that. And you really don't see any difference right here because, again, that hatch was directly underneath. Let's go ahead and let's go to the floor plan. And we have the same problem, and we're going to resolve it here in pretty much the same way because we don't want to see the solid hatch here. We only wanted the solid hatch on the site plan. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up my viewport, go to layer properties under the layers panel. And this time what I'm going to do is under my viewport freeze column here, I'm going to find the other hatch, which was a wall hatch site, and I'm going to freeze that one just in this viewport. So I'm going to go ahead and close that out. And here, as you can tell, we've got all that solid hatch disappeared here. We go back to model space, it's all still there, okay? But when we go back to the site plan, this one is controlled correctly. So this is pretty good. We've kind of laid these out the way we wanted it to. I'm going to go ahead and close my viewports in here. I'm going to zoom extents on that. Same thing in here. I'm going to close my viewport, zoom extents. And I think we did pretty good here in terms of what I wanted to accomplish with the hatching. Now, what we also need to do is we need to make sure that we go to every other layout where a floor plan is going to be laid out and turn off the hatching for those layers. So we need to go to our roof plan. We can open up our viewport, go to layer properties, and do exactly the same thing here on our Viewport Freeze column. We're going to go to the two that we want to do. So there's the first one, and directly underneath it is the second one. We can close this out, and there we go. We're back to the way that we wanted it set up. Now, one of the things I noticed when I was going through some of these different layouts is that there's still going to be a little bit more tweaking on how we want to show this. A quick example is here on the roof plan. When we were setting up the roof plan and doing layer controls, a couple of them that I forgot to do. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure that I could turn off specific layers in here, or change line weights before we produce our final drawings. And that's something that you'll notice we're going to do maybe a little bit later. Let's go ahead and let's go back to model space. And what we want to do is we're going to want to copy these two blocks right here. So I'm going to use the copy command. And I'm going to bring them down into my drawing in here. Just anywhere for now is fine. But what I want to do is I want to start tagging our doors and windows with these tags. The circular one represents a door tag. The diamond shaped one represents our window tags. Now I only want them to show on our floor plan. So once again, it's a layer that we will turn off for the site plan and every other drawing where we don't want that represented, and leave on for the floor plan. So if you go to the site plan in here, you notice that we brought it in here. We're going to go ahead and freeze those on this floor plan viewport. But what we want to do is we want to go ahead and place it everywhere where we have a door and a window. Now you can do that in a couple of places. You can do it in model space with all of this turned on, or you can isolate certain layers and so on, or you can actually go ahead right to the A2 floor plan viewport with the viewport open. And what you can do is you can begin to copy and move here. Now the reason I personally like to do it here is because I will not accidentally snap to any other line work that I have anywhere where I don't want to be able to accidentally move these. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and move this first one, and I'm going to place it in here. Now we may have to move it later on because we may have some dimensions and some annotation that may get in the way. Now if you notice, it's got the number 01. I'm going to double click on the block, and it's got some attributes in here, and there's the number. What we want to do is we want to go sequentially from the front door typically, and we're going to go counterclockwise and working our way through all the doors in the house until we finish up back in this direction. Now there is some rhyme and reason to this, but in case you miss a door and have to go back and do it, ideally it should be sequentially in that order, but sometimes you'll end up adding a door or deleting a door. So it's a guideline, but it's not something that you then have to retag everything if you change sequencing. So the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and start copying this. And notice I'm trying not to snap into any place accidentally, and I'm going to click here. And what we can do is at that point we can then double click the block and change the attribute to number 2 and do OK, and it changed that to 2. What I typically like to do is I like to go ahead and using the copy command, I will snap and start snapping into all of these, working my way around with the understanding that I may have to change the location of the tag eventually. Now when you get another line like this, I think what's most important, it doesn't matter the circles crossing it, as long as the number is clear and you don't have too many lines going across the numbers. Now line weight's going to play a little bit of an importance in this also, but I usually like to leave the tag number without any crossing lines on it. So let's go ahead and work our way through here. I'm going to go ahead and click here. And notice that even on the exterior doors, I'm putting the tag inside. So that's one, again, a typical convention that we use for door tags, while the window tags are going to be on the outside. So I'm working my way around. I don't know if I missed any at this point. Notice that they're still reading all as O2. Well, I'm going to have to go back and modify those as I go. So here's another one here. Now sometimes you're going to have a lot of doors close together. So you're going to need to be tagging these as you go. Let's go ahead and put this one in here. Let's do this one next. Then we can do this one. Just checking to see if I've missed any here. Now notice that I tagged this one. Now this is my shower door. Now the purpose of window and door schedule is to identify the doors and windows that are going to be ordered for your project. And it also shows the size, the type of door it is. A shower door, I have never really included in that door and window schedule. Why? Because it's typically part of an assembly that comes as a separate item. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this one. And I'm going to go back to the copy command and leave that off. So I've got a couple more doors here that I want to tag. Got this one here. Got this one here. Okay, I think I got almost all of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and now work my way in the same direction that I did and go ahead and begin to change the tag number on each. So let's go ahead and let's do this one as O3. O4. Now there are some routines that you could set this up so as you tag them, it will be increasing in number. Now that we haven't done in this project, and that's for another lesson. 7. Those routines could also then automatically add the doors that you have tagged to a door and window schedule. And I'll show you how to do that when we get into AutoCAD architecture. Last one was 9. That's 10. 11. 13. And notice I'm tagging these a little bit different than I laid it out, but again, that's why there is no specific rule. Now in some cases they will do these door and window tags by style. So rather than tagging each one individually with an individual number, they would have it with an A or a B, or the number would represent a size and type of door or window, and then it would have another column in the table which would represent the quantity that you would have. Now, in my office, we've always done them individually because we may modify one. We don't want the entire style to change. So this is how we're going to be representing this in this assignment. I'm going to go ahead and change this one. 25, okay. I think this is the last one. Let's do 28. All right, now once again, we can always modify this later on. We've got all our door tags. I don't think we missed any. As I mentioned before, I am not going to be tagging the shower door. So let's take a look real quick and I'll show you what I want to do. All right, so as you can tell right in here in this viewport, I don't want these tags showing in this drawing. So what I need to do is I need to open up the viewport, and I just need to go in here and I need to freeze that layer. Now let's make sure it happened correctly, that it didn't freeze it here. So that would have been under the layer, which it automatically, since we had a block, it was already going under what we call a door identifier. And if it didn't, we're going to go ahead and modify that. And if you noticed, did not freeze it here either. Now this is one of the instances where we need to unlock. Let's close this out. Okay, what we need to do is we need to, actually I think what I did was I accidentally froze the A glazing identifier. Let's take a look a second. So there's a glazing identifier, and that's the one I froze, which we're going to want to turn off anyways on the site plan. But I need to definitely go to the A door identifier and freeze it there. And there we go. All right, so that's turned off there. Let's close this out. Let's go back to the floor plan, and they're still indicated here, which is excellent. Let's go ahead and now let's go ahead and let's do our windows. Now, sometimes these side lights are part of an assembly of the door. In this case, I don't have any wall in between the two. These are going to be ordered as part of the assembly. So the size of the door and the size of the opening is going to be important in calling that out. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to order these separately, and they're going to be assembling them as separate items. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move this first one, and I'm going to identify and locate that there. And I'm going to do the same thing, this time going just on the windows on the outside. And notice I'm not putting them right in the center. And the reason for that is, when we get into annotation and dimensions, we don't want that to be in the way. Right now we're just sort of locating them. Now notice I snapped accidentally to there, and it ended up in a location that I did not want. Now you make any changes in the floor plan where you add or remove a door or window, you have to make sure that it's reflected on everything that you're doing. Doors then need to be, door tags need to be added or removed, you need to go to the elevations and make sure to fix it there. You need to do a number of things. So here's an example of where my tag occurred right over a line. So I'm going to go ahead and move this slightly out of the way. Move that to there. And let's take a look at what we've got. Now, we can see it here, which is where we want it. We can see both the door and the window tags in here, but because we turned it off here on this viewport, we did not want those to show. So let's take a look at our roof plan, and they are all there. So what I need to do is I need to go ahead and I need to freeze those. Let's make sure that we are freezing those in the viewport. So I'm going to go to Layer Properties and go to those same two layers. One was a door identifier, freeze it, and the other one was a glazing identifier, and I'm going to freeze that there too. So those are turned off there, and I don't think we have them, obviously we don't have them in the elevations. In some architectural firms will tag them here on the elevations. So let's go back to our site plan. That looks great. All right, so here in the model, because this is where we were, even though we were drawing them on the floor plan sheet, we had our viewport open, so we were not placing them on paper space, we were actually placing them in model space. When you have that viewport open, you're sort of taking the glass off of it, so instead of drawing out on your paper or on the table, you've basically opened up a window down into this model space. So that looks good. Let's go ahead and save our drawing. Remember to always be saving. Even though we initially saved this drawing right away, and there is an autosave, I always tend to save quite a bit, usually after I've done a major move like this. So what's the next thing that we want to do? Well, what we want to do is we want to create a table which we're then going to be able to put all the information that we want in it in reference to these doors and windows. So we're going to be able to tell them, as in this case, it's going to be a 3'0" by 6'8", and it's going to be a swing door. Sometimes those are called hinged doors. So we're giving it the tag in the table. We want to tag it with the number 01. We're going to give it the size, which is going to be 3'0" by 6'8". We're going to give it the style, which means that it's hinged, a swing hinged door. We can use one or the other one. And then we're going to add some notes behind that. Now typically your door and window schedules have a lot more information than that, but in this case we're going to go ahead and keep it very simple. So we're going to limit it to one column for the tag, the second column for the size, the third column for the style or the type, and the fourth column is going to be notes, where we want to add any information that we may find that is helpful for the contractor or their subcontractors to be able to determine exactly what we're looking for. As I mentioned before, door and window schedules sometimes will have what we call rough openings. They will also may have some details on the schedules reference. They may also have door hardware packages that might be included. So that's something that we are not going to do in this, but we can do later on in some other demonstrations and lessons when we get into AutoCAD architecture or when we get into Revit. So let's zoom back out and let's talk about a table. So a table is basically almost like an Excel worksheet, and you can bring those in, but in this case we're going to actually create the table right here in model space. And what we're going to do is we're going to modify the table style. This is under the Annotate tab at the top, and right here you have a tables panel. The table style that we're going to use is going to be standard. So one of the things that we need to understand is that standard table style is not annotative. So we can always scale it up and down, but we have to do some settings that we need to modify here before we go ahead and start setting it up. So let's go ahead and the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and left click there once, and we're going to get a pop-up window in here. So there's the style that we're using. If I want to edit that, I'm going to do that. Right now it's based on insertion point. So if it's based on insertion point, I can determine what the column width is that I need here. Now what that's going to do is, based on the number of columns, we're going to go ahead and each column will be the equivalent of 5 feet in model space. So that's about what we want. Well, that's about correct to what we want. Now, the row height here doesn't let you put a value, a distance value, like they did in the column width. Why? If you hover over all of these, it sort of gives you a little bit of information. The height of the rows are going to be based on the height of the text that you decide to do. And that is then determined by the table style that you're going to use. So what I'm going to do is, in this window, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to go ahead and click on this table style dialog button. And here I'm going to go ahead and make some modifications here. Now, you may have seen this previously with door styles and so on, but I'm going to go ahead and modify. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up a little bit. And if you notice here under cell styles, they have 3 basic cell types. Title, it's going to be the headers, and then the data fields. Now you could see that in the previous pop-up window that we have. So the first thing we're going to do is, under General, this sort of tells you what the fill color is. We don't want anything filled. The alignment of the text, and also the margins that are going to exist between the borders of the cell and the actual text that you have in it. So we may want to modify that a little bit later, but the first thing we're going to do is we're going to worry about for the data type, we're going to go ahead to text. There's a standard. This is under data here first. Text style is standard. If you want to change that, we can modify it by clicking the radio button right in there. Right under there is standard. The style is Arial, a little bit different from what we've been doing before. This is perfect the way it is. It's not annotative, so we're going to go ahead and leave this at 0. And we're going to go ahead and cancel because it's like what we want. The text height is important at this point. Now, if we want the text to read in paper space this height, we need to add a multiplier here, because remember, we are placing our table in model space. So if you have text height 1/8 inch here and you place it in model space, it's going to be impossible to see, because it's going to be as if it's only 1/8 of an inch in relationship to your drawing. So what we need to do is we need to apply a multiplier here to, in this model space, at the scale of 1/4 inch is equal to a foot, how high would we want those letters to read? Well, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and apply a multiplier. Since this seems to be the default right here, okay, or we have it at 1/8 inch, I want this to read 1/8 inch in my paper space. So what I need to do is I need to go ahead and modify this. I'm going to take the 1/8, multiply it by 48, so I have 48 over 8. I can go down to my calculator for that. Let's go ahead and open that up. So I've taken 1/8 multiplied by 48, so I have 48 divided by 8. And I want my text in the data field to read the equivalent of 6 inches high. Now I can explain that a little bit later on again when we start doing different types of tables, but let's go ahead and change that to 6 inches for that. And the borders we can leave pretty much the way it is. It looks like it might be a little bit too tight on the top, but that's okay. All right, now let's go ahead and change this to header. Now, let's go to the text, and if you look and hover here, All right, we want to change this. We want that header. In this case, we can do it exactly the same size. So let's go ahead and use that as 6 inches for that. Text angle stays the same. Borders we're going to leave pretty much the same for now. Let's go ahead and do general. And once you set this up, once you set the table up, we can always modify it. So let's go ahead and this time let's go to title. And we may want the title just a little bit bigger. Let's go back to general, check it out, that's fine. Text. And in this case, we want the title to be more than 1/8 inch high when we read it in paper space. So let's go ahead. If we wanted it to be 1/4 inch high, instead of 6 inches, we would want it to be, because remember, at this scale, 6 inches is going to read like 1/8 inch in paper space. 6 inches in model will read as 1/8 inch in paper space. So 1/4 inch would be 12 inches high. So that may end up being a little bit too big, but let's go ahead and put that in, and we can always change that. Okay. We're going to do OK. So we've modified this for the style. Make sure it's set to current, and we're going to close. So if we were to click this in here and begin, we can first let's check out and make sure we have the right number of columns. We wanted one column to be the tag, the other one is the size of the door, the third is our type or style, and the fourth is our notes. So we need to actually reduce this to 4. Our column widths are 5. So if I place this in here, it's going to place the table already here. Make sure cap locks in, and let's just go ahead and type a couple of things in here. Hit enter. Okay, let's go ahead and click our table. And what you can do is, in this case, you can go ahead and, let's say, type in here, click on the outside, and there is our text. Let's go ahead and click in here, type, and there it is. Now you can tell right now that we have a different size for our title, our headers, and here's our data is going to be the same size. So there it is. But notice one thing that happened in here. Right now it's set up so that this is actually justified at the top. I need to modify that. So let's go ahead and let's go back to our table style editor, and let's take a look at what happened. So our data field has got a little bit of a problem. Let's go back to data, and let's just check and see where our justifications are for that. So we've got standard modified in there, 6-inch block, borders, okay, and here's general. So right here it says alignment is top center. Let's go ahead and modify that to middle center, and let's see what happens. Set current again, even though it is, and that has now adjusted this. Now this table is adjustable, so if you really wanted to pull it and make it bigger, you can. Notice it's doing every single cell equally spaced for that. So if you wanted to do, let's say, less space for our tag, you can shift that over in there. A little bit less space for this, and for this style. You can do that and leave our notes panel a little bit more. So let's go ahead and let's see what that looks like, and let's move it where we think it's going to eventually be, just temporarily, and then we'll relocate it. Now notice the layer that it was set up on. If we go to the properties here, it was set up on the layer that I had identified. Now what I want to do is I want to create a layer specifically for this and then change the location of it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to identify it first, and again, because we wanted a unique layer to be able to turn on and off, we want to be able to turn it off on the site plan and only have it on the floor plan. Now this looks pretty good. The only problem I'm having with it is that it's still a little bit too big. So what's happened is that the table itself needs to be modified. That's pretty easy to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab it, and I'm going to bring this in and shrink it down quite a bit, and I'm going to put in a sample 01, see what that looks like. Here I'm going to put sliding. Now I definitely need my notes bigger, so I'm going to go ahead and bring that in here. And I need to make that a little bit bigger. Alright, so here we have the same problem. The tag looks like the identifying location of it was not correct. So let's see why that happened. Let's go ahead and delete what I had in there. Looks like the justification is off for that. So let's take a look. This justification. That is centered. That is centered. And this one, for some reason, is not. Let's go ahead and let's do this one. That looks like it's going to be centered. So let's take a look at what happens in our table. I'm going to go ahead and put 01 here. And let's go back to our standard table right in here, and let's take a look at why that one is not. So let's go ahead and let's go to modify. I'm going to check, this is the header. It says middle center. It says type is a label. Okay. And let's find out why it's not. Now this should be working in here, but let's go to the text. 6-inch standard style, text angle, table direction is correct. Let's do OK. Check the borders. We're good there. There's the text. And let's go ahead and cancel out of this. Do close. So one of the things that we want to be able to find out is, for example, if I went here and I double clicked this one and tried to put in a value, let's say 1 or 01. Now notice it's not accepting the 0. So this may need to be tagged as 1, 2, 3, 4. But unlike the other header cells, it's coming out on the top right. Now what we can do is we can check here under table style and see what's going on with that. So let's go ahead and modify. And if you take a look at this under header, under alignment, it's middle center. But something is happening here where it's not following the rules for that specific cell. So let's go ahead and do OK. Make sure it's still set to current and close. So if we take a look at this column here, or this group right in here, which is our header, this one, if we double click there, it's or here for the notes. If I was to apply text here, it would be centered. And if I do on our data cells, that looks correct too. But on this one, for some reason, this cell is not justified correctly. It should match these. If you get an instance like this, there are still some ways to modify this or fix it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here, and if you take a look at under properties for that cell, one of them here is alignment. For some reason it's set to top right for that specific cell, sort of as an override, but I want to do is middle center. So what I want to do is text orientation. Let's see if there's anything else that we can go ahead and modify. Now the fact that I cannot put a 0 in may have something to do with this whole number. So what I can do, let's see if there's anything that I can modify here. So if I was to change this from whole number to general, I think this may allow me now to type in 01. There we go. Actually no, still did not. Okay, so let's go ahead and leave that on there. Let's see what this cell is set up to. Alright, that one is set up to general. I'm going to go ahead and modify this. I'm going to go ahead and modify that one to, okay, it's still in general. All of these are, okay, data type is text there. I think this may help if I was to, let me see if this one is going to allow the 0, 1. Nope. Okay, so if I was to change this one, I'm going to delete that for a second. And let's see what happens here if I change this to text. Now, because I tagged it as 0, 1, I want these to read as 0, 1. So what I want to do is let's go ahead and let's see what happens. Now, notice what's happening. This obviously has to do something with the style that you choose. This one is set to general. This one is set to text. This one is now set to general. So by modifying this one, notice it changed the justification. Let's go back to that cell and let's go ahead and actually I think it was this one. Let's go ahead and let's change to that one is a text. Let's go ahead and change this one to text and see what happens. Okay, we're still justified at the top right. So one of the issues I was running into in trying to develop this was that when I started to modify each one of the cells, because it was either preset or there were some overrides on it, I wanted to make sure that I was able to justify in the middle center each one of these. So by identifying it here, I wanted to go ahead and set the alignment to middle center. This can stay general as data type for all of these. I just want to check these to make sure that they are still middle center. It looks like all the rest are in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start identifying these with the text that I want. That would be tag. This would be size. So let's delete everything on there. This is going to be type. Sometimes it's called style. And then this is going to be notes. So I may need to make this one and pull it out a little bit more. Not sure if we're going to have too many notes on this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make the notes a little bit bigger. And here under tag, I'm going to make sure that we can fit that as the 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and go in there. I think what's happening is the minute that we put in a number, it's not accepting it. So let's go back to general and let's go ahead and do middle center. And there we go. Now, let's check and see if this is going to occur to each one that we're going to do. So let's go ahead and put 2. And what's happening is that it's defaulting for some reason to the top right. Well, how do we fix that? Let's go ahead and highlight the entire, and let's go ahead and highlight this button right up on the top left. So with the entire table selected, let's go to the properties here and see if we can have an alignment that's going to be universal on the entire table. So I'm going to go in here to alignment and I'm doing middle center, and I think that sort of took care of the problem. So let's do 3. Notice I don't have the 0 in front of it, and it's still defaulting to this. So let's see what we can do to fix that. I think what we can do is let's highlight all of these cells here. If we click here and we click all of these as we go, let's look at alignment for that, and middle center. Now the other way to do this is if you open this up and you actually select everything in here. Let's see if we've got the same problem. So it's got alignment middle center for all of those. And let's see if we're going to run into the same problem. 4, it's good. Okay, we're still having a little bit of a problem here that we got to resolve. So let's see what we can do. So in trying to resolve our justification here, we're running into some problems with the table style. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to place the information that we need. We're going to try to stretch this guy down also. Let's see if we can pull this down, which may create additional rows. Let's put our ortho on, and when you click down, you see it's not adding it to it. So what you're going to do is you're going to highlight, and you're actually going to click on here on the top left to where it's all entirely highlighted, and you get a table cell tab that comes up. So what we want to do is we want to insert rows that we're going to be doing that. So we want to do insert rows below, and we don't want this break to occur. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that what ends up happening is that this will be able to be lengthwise all the way down. So let's see what we can do to grab some of this and bring it down and make sure that we do not have the break on here. So let's go back to our properties and cell locking, cell type, contents, text style. What we want to be able to do is we want to be able to change the number of rows that are totaled in here. So what we want to do is let's go ahead and first we want to make sure that we do not get a second row in here. So what we need to do is we need to highlight the table and then come here under where it says table breaks. Right now it's set to enabled. Let's go ahead and change that to no, and then we get a row coming down in here. So every time we want to add another row, we can do that by basically going back here, clicking on there, and then we can be adding rows below or above. So here's an example. We're at 18 right now. For the doors, we have, I think, let's check our doors. We have 28 doors, so we're going to need 28 data cells in here. So it's going to be 28 plus these two additional. We're going to need a total of 30. So let's go ahead and we can insert below. And because we had the whole thing highlighted, you can tell that we now have a total of 36. We're going to highlight, let's go ahead and highlight this. We said we only need 30. So let's highlight this one, this one, this one. And let's see if we can get rid of those in there. We're going to go here to delete rows, and we can delete those, and we've got our 30 located right in here. So I'm going to go ahead and number these all the way down, and let's see what we can do to resolve our problem in terms of the size of what we're going to be doing. Now this is a pretty long table right in here. We want to make sure that it reads clearly when we do our full-size print. So it might be a little bit too big. We can always scale this down, or we can modify some of the situation here in the table style to change the text height. So there's a couple of ways that we're going to be able to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to type in 4, 5, 6. Now notice it's still defaulting over to the top right. 8. I'm going to go ahead and fix that after we fill in our cells. That's 10. 11. 12. Alright, so there we've got that. Now here what we're going to do is, at least with the first door, and I know that's going to be at 3'0" by 6'8", I'm going to go ahead and add that information here. Now you need to put two dimensions. You need to put the 3-foot 0. Now sometimes you can do the inch symbol without the dash in between because we may be limited in size. So let's go ahead and let's do the inch, then times. And then what we're going to do is we are going to do the height of the door. And then in this case, for the type, I'm going to go ahead and type in with the caps lock on, swing. And I'm not going to add any notes at this point. So let's give another example. For door number 2 is going to be our garage door. So we can put in our size for the garage door here. Now I want to double check the size that I have in here, so I'm going to go back to the Home tab. I'm going to do a measurement, and it's set to 16 feet. And we need to go back to the elevation, and let's see what we've got in terms of the height of the garage door. Now we're going to take it from where it rests on the slab all the way to the top. We're going to do another measurement, and that is set to 7 feet. Sometimes you can actually make an 8-foot door if you wanted to. In this case, we're going to leave it at 7 feet. So let's go back to the floor plan where we were doing our schedule. Now notice everything we're drawing in here is now going to be showing up right here, even though we are drawing it in the actual viewport. So let's go ahead and let's modify this so that we can get our, this one is going to be 7-foot 0. I'm sorry, 16-foot 0 by the height is 7-foot 0. And this one we're going to put, now some people will put garage, we will put overhead, and then we can continue with our doors as we go. Just going to do one more example. This is also an exterior door. Sometimes you'll have columns for materials, etc. So let's go ahead for 3. Let's go ahead and also for that one, let's do 3-foot 0 and 6-foot 8. And we're going to put swing. Now you can cut and paste if you want to do this as you go along. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fill out all of this information as you go door by door. And I want you to, all the doors are going to be 6'8" with the exception of that garage door. So as you go around the house, I want you to fill all this out as you're going to be drawing. And we can go from that point. We're going to go ahead and make some modifications. And what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and once you fill all this out, we're going to go ahead and modify it and make sure that the justification for all of it is centered. After completing the door schedule, what we can do is let's take a look at some of the things that we may want to modify and add. Now, in completing this and putting in the sizes, I also noticed that I had missed a couple of door tags. So what I've done is I've just re-tagged these a little bit. I included 18 here. I renumbered it a couple times, making sure it all came out. I've got my 4 columns located in here. A lot of schedules, and I mentioned this before, you're going to find out later on, have a lot more columns. I mentioned that you may have rough openings, you may have additional information such as head, jamb, and sill details. You may have the materials added on here. For now, we're just going to go with a very, very simple door schedule as an example on this project. Once we get this door schedule to look very much like what we want it to, we can then copy it, simply copy it, and also add it as a window schedule. But we want to make sure sure that our text style, that our font, that our style, our table style, is the way we want it to do. I'm just going to continue and make some slight modifications in here. Maybe add a couple of notes in here just as an example so that you can see what we're going to do. And since we were having some problems getting all of this to align properly, even though it's set up correctly in the in the table, what we'll do is we'll try to highlight all the cells and modify them all in one shot. So let's take a look at a couple things that I did and did not like. Number one, to me it seems just a little bit too big. I also want to modify the style. I want my titles, even though we're in model space, to match what we're doing with our labels right here. So if I click on the label and I take a look at what the properties are, if you notice that the style for that font is Book Antigua. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at it. I'm assuming that it's going to be Book Antigua is going to be the font type for that style. So what we may want to do is, at least for our titles, is modify the font style to Book Antigua to match. Now I want to keep these as a very straightforward font style, so I'm pretty happy with the Arial that is the default for the standard, as opposed to the Romans SHX that we use in our identifiers and we're going to be using later on in our font, because it's a little bit bolder and I want the things inside of my table to stand up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start adjusting some of this. I'm going to open up the viewport and I'm going to go ahead and type in here, and I'm going to stay upper and lowercase just for the titles, but I'm going to stay uppercase for all of this so it's all readable. And once again, that's because I want it to match what I have on my labels. So I'm going to go ahead and type in door schedule, and I'm going to click that right into there. Now the size of this matches what we've got in there, but the font is still not correct. So let's see what happens if we go ahead and modify it in our table location here so we can see if this is going to adjust. So we are in a standard table style right here. I'm going to go ahead and click the manage button in here. There's my style. I'm going to go ahead and modify it. I want to make sure that I am on the window that says title right here. And I'm going to change my text style, and let's see what we have available in here. I'm going to go ahead and change it here to Book Antigua, and if you can tell what it's done, it's actually changed just that one to title. So let's see what that looks like. I'm going to do OK. Just set current, and you can see that this now matches what we have down here. So I'm happy with what we did in there. What I'm going to do is I also don't like the Arial, the full width in here. So there's a couple of things I could do. I don't like the fact that it's so bold, so I want to minimize that a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change this font style in the standard table to a little bit different for both the header fields and the data fields. So I'm going to go to standard. What I can do is, under my standard text style, I can go to this button right in here, and there if you take a look at what's my font for the standard text style in here, it's Arial. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a look at some options in here, and I'm going to look at Arial Narrow. I'm pretty happy with that. I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to apply that, set current and close, and do OK. Close, and again this narrows it up a little bit. I'm also pretty happy with that. I'm going to start playing around a little bit with the door schedule to see what we can do in terms of bringing some of these elements in. I feel that it's taking up just a little bit too much space, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start playing with the column widths in here, and I can do that right in here. In case I have a longer area for notes, I can always widen that out, but based on my double bifold and some of the elements that I wanted here, I'm going to go ahead and pull this even closer so I take up less space for that. That looks pretty good. Still got a little bit of a margin, can go a little bit more. Now, some door styles might require under type a little bit more information than that, so I'm going to start bringing this in. So the width of my table has been reduced. There we go. Once again, that looks pretty good. Now, let's go ahead and do one more thing because I'm not happy with the justification in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tag everything, go down to here, and make sure I've got every table selected. Then I'm going to go to my, after I've put in all my information, I'm going to go in and go to the alignment here where it says varies, and I'm going to do middle center, escape out of that, and it looks like everything has been located in the right location. Now what I want to do is I'm going to take this door schedule and I'm going to copy it down, and I want to duplicate it. Well, let's do one more thing. I think one other thing that I want to do, I want to leave these tag sizes, the text there at 1/8 of an inch, but I want my data fields to match what I'm going to be using on my annotation. So what I want to make sure is I want to modify that, and I can do that also by going to the table here, and I'm going to go to modify. This time I'm going to go to the data, cell style, and I'm going to change my text height to 4.5 inches. Now that would correspond at 1/4 inch with our scale factor of 48, because it's a 1/4 inch if you have 4 in the lower, 4 1/8 inch. Before at 6 inches, that corresponded with an 1/8 inch high letter in paper space. I want it to be 3/32 because that's going to be the size of the dimensions and notes that we're going to be adding for these architectural drawings. Using the scale factor multiplied to 3/32, I would get 4.5 inches as the height in model space for those texts. So I'm going to do OK there. I'm going to click OK. There it reduced the size of the data fields, close, and that brings it in just a little bit more. Makes it a little bit clearer. I was hoping that it would also bring up some of the fonts. So if I'm bringing that in, I can bring that up a little bit. It's reducing that a little bit. Let's pull it up even more. And it's reducing the space, the border around. Let's do that one more time. Just as an example, you could bring it all the way in here, but that's getting a little bit tight, so you can tell that. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that down in here to something that I'm going to be comfortable and does not look a little bit too crowded. That right there looks pretty good. Okay. So I'm going to now copy my table and bring that straight down. I'm going to modify this one. Window schedule. And I'm going to do the same thing here for all my windows. Now if you notice my windows, what ended up happening with my windows, I tagged them, but I have not adjusted the number. So what I also want to do is I'm going to bring my drawing down a little bit. I'm going to unlock my viewport, and I'm going to go ahead and pan this down. Let's open up that viewport. I need to unlock it, and I want to bring that down somewhere. Right about here. As you can tell, I have a layer in here that I need to turn off. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to go back to the Home tab. That's going to be my pool layer. And once I'm pretty happy where it is, let's pan it just a little bit further up. Happy where it is. I'm going to modify that. And I'm going to take a look at what I need to do with my window schedule. So I can do that here, or I can do it in model space, because we're actually working in model space, but with this opened. And what I can do is I can go to the table, just happen to have the last one right in here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to highlight. I know I'm not going to have this many, so just for now I'm going to highlight those right in there. And I'm going to click delete the rows, and now I've got my 18 rows. Let's see how many windows I end up with. Like the door, you're going to start at the front. Notice that the diamond tags are on the outside. This is going to be 1. I'm going to modify this for 2. This one will be 3. And so on. 04. And I'm going to work my way around the house here. And I'm going to take a look at what I have selected for each one of those windows, whether they're fixed picture windows like we have as the side lights, whether they're casements, whether they're sliders, whether they're single or double hung, awning, etc. And I'm going to go ahead and then modify the size, and I'm going to fill out my window schedule. Now to do that, it's going to be a combination. If I don't remember, I don't have it tagged correctly. As an example, if I click on this and I have the properties in here, it tells me what the size of the window is, at least the width of the window, not the height, but it's not telling me what style it is. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and either go to my elevations here, and whatever I have selected, in this case I can tell that they're going to be casement windows. These are going to be fixed. If you take a look at the back, these are all casement windows fixed right here. Now let's take a look at the other sides. Side elevations. It looks like I'm doing casement on all of these, just as an example. Again, your selection may be different. You may have used sliders or what they call gliders when you look at the inside of the properties. And looks like they're all casement with a few fixed windows. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at which ones were in the back. It looks like we only have 1 fixed window in the back, and we have 2 fixed windows here. Okay, let's go back to our schedule, and I'm going to go ahead and finish tagging these as we go all the way around the house, and then I'm going to fill in my schedule. After finishing renumbering the windows, what we did is we completed the window schedule, and we did a little bit more manipulation on it by highlighting these. Let's open up that, and highlighting them and just pulling these over a little bit more to reduce the width. Now once again, you may add some notes in here referencing each door or each window. That may require a little bit more space, but for now we're going to leave this the way it is. And I try to make sure that my window schedule matched in terms of any adjustments I did, manual adjustments I did to the width of each one of the columns, the individual columns. I've gone ahead and matched it here with the window schedule, making sure that all the information is clear to read. If you zoom out, you can tell that here you can still read everything very clearly. So let's go ahead and escape that. Let's see what this looks like. Looks like everything has been tagged. Once again, these are all things that we can come back to later on if we find that we need to modify the size of a door, add a window, or remove them, so that we can be adjusting the project as we go on. Remember, it's never a finite design. You're always going to have slight adjustments here or there, not just in the initial elements that you design, but eventually even also in terms of how you represent it in terms of your documentation, your deliverables.